Hello Reshifters, here's a little tip for you regarding Reshift RV. Now in this scene you don't see me having any Reshift render view open. Some users keep it float, some don't because they don't have enough real estate, so they actually just cram it in a corner and work with that. Well, what I can say about this is you're missing out a lot. Let me show you why. You see here, I see just a few icons here, but there's more to that, way more. You should have the Redshift render view open to all the icons here, and there's a very good reason I'm going to explain in a second. So let me dock this in here, and let me bring up Redshift shader graph, and you can see I have all this, right? What I want to do is actually work on my scene and not care about object names, about material names, about shader balls, or how the material might work in a shader ball scene. You can see here my actual material manager, it's set to list, and usually it's kind of like this and closed. And the reason I do this is because I can manage my materials and my whole scene without even having to open the material manager or even look at a shader ball. Let me show you how you can do exactly the same thing. I'm going to start rendering in this scene, and I like to actually be able to work on this little horse here. Okay, now the scene might take a while to start rendering and update and so on and so forth. I kind of got back to look dev stage, so I'm going to disable bokeh in this case and photographic exposure, and I'm going to disable the Redshift environment because I don't want any God rays coming from through the window in this scene. I want to actually focus on the horse. Okay, so let me select the horse, and I can select it here, right? And I can try to select something else in the scene and so on and so forth, and this can take a while. The thing is, I like to speed this up, so I'm gonna use a combo of 3 little buttons. 2 are here in Redshift Render View, select object and select material, and then the next one is this viewport solo. You can see here immediately I have something to work with. This is absolutely fantastic. The only problem I have is that my actual dome light is still having its original texture for the HDR environment. Well, I can either load an image, in this case it's a 50% gray, and if you don't want to load an image, you can actually use a light shader, add a C4D shader, and then for this either get a color. For instance, in this case I'm gonna set it to 50% gray, connect it to your backplate text 1, and you can see that everything is still white, and it's a bit weird if you want, and that's because we haven't enabled backplate. And now I have something that I can actually interactively change. But wait, there's more. I'm not actually bound to use a solid color. I can use a gradient, for instance. And of course this has to be a V gradient. And then I can check this in real time and decide what I want. In this case I don't want a gradient, I just want a color, and that will be my 50% gray. You really don't have to have a 50% gray background if you want, and if you need something else you can use something else. So let's get back to this. I'm not gonna select the object in the viewport anymore. Actually I can make the viewport this big or even smaller if I need to. Okay, so I don't care about this anymore at all. I only care about my Redshift render view. And remember, we have this solo button, so which is off right now, and this object and material. So I'm gonna select the object, and it selects the object in the outliner here, and then you have the properties, and you can see that, well, I have quite a few materials, objects here. So if I select something else, it will select something else, and I can actually just click and select an object. Now the nice thing about this, I can then solo and then simply, well, I still have my viewport open because I have to just, you know, tumble around the camera, and then I can simply click pick material and I can work on my material. In this case, I'm gonna do a small correction, a color correction actually, and let's actually have a look at this without going through the shader. So just connect this to the output, and you see here that I'm using a little shortcut. Well, you can do exactly the same thing, customization, customize command, and you're gonna look for connect node to output, which is in my case is set to Q. You can do exactly the same thing using the menu here, tools, connect node to output, but since I have a shortcut, I'm good to go. So I'm just gonna look at the raw texture if you want. So I'm just gonna gamma correct it a bit. Now this might look a bit weird because it's flat and I don't have lighting, so switch to the actual ratio material with the lights in my scene, right? And then I can just, you know, adjust whatever I need to adjust to get this working, maybe less saturated. Let's say I'm happy with this. Okay, and I'm done. I haven't even opened the material manager. I don't need to know the name of my material. I don't have to look for it. I have it spot on. Then I'm gonna disable the viewport solo and then simply work on something else. Let's say this is what I'm seeing in my scene. Okay, and I like to work on this object solo. That's perfect. And I like to adjust the translucency of this. So pick the material, go for a translucency, weight is 0.5, maybe it needs to look a bit thicker, so less light see-through or more. And I have this in pretty much real time because I'm only rendering one object. I don't care about anything else. I have one object, exactly the lights in the scene. They're not some generic lights for a shader ball, and everything works really, really fast. Well, on top of that, we have something else. Let's dial out the solo mode and let's have a look at how we can actually work with bokeh. So this is my camera, let's say. Okay, now if you're opening the options, well, you can do this through this cog or pressing O. You have PostFX control here and bokeh. By default, when you're enabling bokeh, derive focus distance from camera, it's on. In this case, I want to disable it because it's controlled the focus distance here. I want to be able to control my own focus distance using the focus picker. So I can click, well, let's pick up a better framing for depth of field, something maybe like so. Okay, now you can see that the scene is pretty dark, so I'm gonna enable photographic exposure here and just increase or decrease the f-stop or increase the film ISO, something like this. And by clicking while this click to focus option is active, I can set my focal point. In this case, I'm focusing on this gramophone. Okay, and then with alt click drag, I can set the circle of confusion radius, and you can see here the circle of confusion changing when I do this. So see, this is going in real time. So I can go for something like a macro scene like this when everything is out of focus and only the gramophone is in focus, or actually having something more, well, more down to earth, probably something like this. And let's focus on the horse. Just click, and you know what, if I want to speed this even more, I'm gonna switch to clay mode, and this will actually ignore any shaders and simply allow me to do my bokeh without any problem. So look at this, click, it's way faster, trust me. And then set your focus, your circle of confusion, click, and then set it. Okay, and then of course I'm going back to my regular render, and that's fine. Now another small extra tip is the fact that all the post effects here work in real time even when the render has been stopped. So to show you this, I can really do a full render and play with it. I can have this in real time rendering, okay, or I can do something a bit more weird. I'm going to show you in a few seconds, but first let's enable the photographic exposure, dial this down to probably 100. Shutter time ratio, I think the f-stop is a bit low. Let's get a bit of contrast in the scene. If this seems a bit cold, I can make it a bit warmer by actually setting my white point to the opposite of warm, which is cold, which is blue. Okay, and you can see here the difference. Okay, and all this works in real time, and it works in real time not just on this exact frame buffer. You can load a snapshot. Okay, so let's load a snapshot. I have one here, which is a 3D render, and I can work on it. This is the actual render without any post effects, and I can actually have everything working for me without actually breaking a sweat. I don't have to re-render, I don't have to do anything. I can work, well, whatever I decide to be in terms of looks and everything. And in this case you can see here that, well, maybe I need a bit more of this, and most important, you see this black or dark shadows, and these come from the black crushing. So I can dial down the black crushing almost to nothing, and then just use the white point again just to make these dark areas kind of feel like orange bleeding, because it's GI bouncing around. So I can just drag this to the right, but keep this as blue, and here's what's happening. See how the shadows go a bit more orange than before. The only thing you cannot set on a loaded snapshot, it's the actual bokeh and the noise. We have the noise controls here, and we also have the bokeh, but this won't work of course on a already 3D rendered image. But this gives you enough flexibility for yeah, just before saying that, hey, send it to PV and it's done. You can save it, you can do whatever you want. And you know what, this is free real-time post effects for whatever you have. It doesn't have to be a 3D render, it can be an image of your choice, and you can do this all in real time for free. So I hope you really enjoyed this tip, and I hope you're really enjoying Redshift as much as we do making, and well, happy redshifting guys. Cheers.